So for this video, we're going to be using Topaz Video AI version 6 to upscale quite a small clip of a cat. So this has been taken on someone's phone or something like that, and it's a very short and low res. So on the format here, on the layout we've got here, we've got the original on the left hand side, and we've got the what will be the edited version on the right hand side. Now at the top, in the top menu bar here, the top toolbar shall I say, you can change the different preview modes between the split screen that we had there, a draggable split, or a single image view. And for any of these, you can select this end icon here for a full screen preview to just get a little bit more sort of concentration on what you're doing and a little bit less clutter on the screen. So you can toggle that on and off at any point. Now at the bottom, you've got your basic timeline. You can see this clip is just slightly over 2 seconds long. So it's a very short clip. And if we just play it, it's just a really basic video of a cat just looking around, so really nothing special. But we're going to just show you some basic techniques here to bring a little bit more out of this image, or this footage should I say. So we're going to go across the right hand side here and start at the top. We're going to ignore the codec settings for the moment and this try starlight button because they're not really relevant to this, and we're on adjustments. So before we change anything, it's important to note that the settings that it reads here, we're clicking on original, the settings it will read here are the sizes and frame rate of the original clip. So we can see it's only 360 by 640 pixels at 30 frames per second. Right? So when we're doing adjustments, if we click on the tab here for Untitled 1 at the top, which is going to be our edited version, we can change that to whatever we want. We can double click on that and we can just change it to cat edit. Just to sort of remind you when you're looking at it visually that that's the unedited version, and click that and then you're making the edited version. So what I want to do on this one, let's say I want to have this at a specific size. You can either do click on your output resolution drop down here and you can do 2-4 times upscale. You can choose a lot of preset resolutions and then you can make custom resolution. So let's say I wanted it to be 1920 by 1080. Well, if I chose that, it's going to do it in the horizontal format because it's 1920 first, so it's going to make it 1920 pixels horizontally and 1080 pixels vertically. So it's obviously the wrong aspect ratio for this particular image, this particular footage. Sorry. So if we ran that now, crop settings is going to letterbox it and mess it up. So all we do, if you want to flip it the other way, you just go to custom resolution, and then you just change it by the longest or the shortest edge. So let's say I know I want this to be 1920 by 1080, but maybe the other way. I would just go width, prioritize width, and I'd just go 1080. And it's going to make sure that the width of that is 1080. And because it's the correct aspect ratio, then it's made it 1920 the other direction. So you can manually type in here the width and the height. And you can uncheck the lock button and you can completely separate the width and the height if you've got something that's outside of a set aspect ratio. Okay, so now we've set the size, we're going to come down to video type. This kind of footage is going to be progressive, so we're going to leave it on that. Now AI model, it's going to highlight with a little gold and black star here icon the AI models that it thinks are going to be suitable for your footage. Now, normally for me, one of those highlighted ones is the better one, but I normally have a little dig around and find out which one. And so there's an easy way to do this. Now, I'm running on an M1 MacBook Pro, so it's not the most powerful Mac for, it's not the most powerful computer spec period for running video upscaling on and playing it back large chunks in real time, but there's a good function that enables you to check out what you're doing in terms of visually changing the footage without having to buffer and render out lots of footage. So for this, we're going to say, let's check out Proteus, let's check out Nix, I never know how to pronounce that one. Nix, the second registered one, recommended one, and then the Thea down here, which says it's for high fidelity and details. We're going to check that out. We're going to do that all at the same time, and I'll show you how. Next to our cat edit here, we can actually we can click this plus to add another empty tab, but we can right click and we can put duplicate, and then we can right click and we can duplicate again. So we can call one of these cat edit Proteus. You don't have to rename these, by the way. This is just me showing you, or we could put, I'll just put the names of the models in. So what we're doing here is we're giving ourselves several different tabs where we can set the various results and then flick between them to actually sort of A/B test them in real time, along with any other custom parameters we want to change. So you can set tons of these and you can then check them against each other in real time. But because we haven't got a very good, very high-powered machine here working on, we've got a great function to just test something very quickly. So if we click down into the timeline and we see here this blue render button here. Now you can choose how much of the preview, how much of the timeline is rendered when you press the button, so it'll apply all of the parameters to the side, including the upscale, the processing, any frame rate interpolation or anything. In to out, you can set the in and out point, but if you do minimum 5 frames, what it's going to do now is if you just click that, I'm actually going to just temporarily zoom in here to click this little magnification button where it says fit percentage. I'm going to put 100%. So now we're looking at the before and the after at 100% size. Obviously the before size will have been expanded past 100% to comparatively give us the same view as the upscale version. So now we're looking at the thing nice and close. We can click render 5 frames. So we'll click on that and you can see it's rendered out. It's showing that green line there, which is 5 frames from where we clicked down in the timeline where we clicked. So just get to a point where you like the look of it, click. And so now that's set our right hand side view here as the Proteus model. So if we click on the next tab along that I've renamed to that Nix one, again we've got the button in the same place. I'm going to change the model to Nix. I'm going to press render 5 frames again, and it's going to update that screen in a few seconds with it says processing there. So then it's updated it with the generic Nix application, and then Thea, which I've spelt wrong in the tab, but just ignore that. Again, we'll go down, click it here, and then click on the render 5 seconds button. So by rendering for 5 seconds, we're basically telling it to update the preview, because that won't be enough footage to actually enable us to appreciate the movement of the video. If I play that, it's that tiny little bit there, but it's enough for us to evaluate what's happening with the changes we're making. So now we've got those 3 different tabs set at those 3 different modes. We can click through them and have a look. So this is the default settings of Proteus. So I'm looking at the right hand side here and how it changes. Then we've got the Nix version, which seems to be a lot softer because it's more of a, again here it gives you a little hint. It says dedicated denoising. So that's applying a denoising amount behind the sort of scenes as a default on this model. I really don't need that, so it's actually softening things up a bit too much. So I'm actually going to close that down now because I know we're not going to use that. So now we're between Proteus and Thea. So I click on that, and the Thea is for high details, high fidelity and details. So if you click between the two, again, we're just concentrating on the right hand side of the screen at the moment. Proteus is like an all-rounder. And you've got Thea, which is high fidelity and details. So if you look at areas like the fur and the whiskers, if you go between Proteus and Thea, the Thea model definitely has a bit more separation in the individual strands of fur and whiskers. Proteus looks a little bit softer, a little bit more mushy, but bearing in mind on all these we can still do extra sharpening, we can add extra grain and everything like that. So we can continue, keep these tabs open and continue to make adjustments, changing between the two, depending on what other adjustments are available to us. So let's say I've got the Thea. I've got the Thea one selected at the moment, the Thea tab selected at the moment. I am going to correct that because it's annoying me that it's wrong. So now we can go, okay, what other options have we got here? And we've got an add noise, which is not the same as add grain. Add noise is actually adding some of the original image back in over the top of the process one to try and add back in some of the original variations and things like that to stop it looking too flat. focus fix, which is not ready for this, not right for this. So grain. So let's click apply grain. And again, this won't automatically update. It's going to, as soon as we click something else and change something else, it's going to knock this back to the original unpreviewed version. So now it's knocked it back to look like the before here on the left. But as soon as we then click render 5 frames, and it's going to update that quickly with those grain settings and the Thea model. So we can see straight away, wow, that's too much grain for me. That looks very noisy. And we can drag this about and look at the rest of it. So it's always good to have a little bit of grain in the image, especially if it's a little bit soft and mushy and you want to just give it some semblance of like grit and a little bit of sort of it blends gradients together and things like that and stops banding. But that's too much for me. And if you weren't previewing it on these 5 frames and you were previewing it on a much longer bit of footage, it would be a lot more of a tedious task to sort of run all that and then realize it's too much and then go back, which is why I love doing this 5 frame preview. So then you can work on the visual of the footage almost separately to the movement of the footage. So I'm going to drop the grain amount down, maybe to 3, and we'll see what it's like with the grain size as it is. Again, as soon as I've made adjustments, it's knocked it back to before the preview. So now we need to click the render 5F button down here, which is effectively update our preview. Take a few seconds on my machine. And as you can see here, looking at the background, it's just a nice amount of noise there, a nice amount of grain, sorry. And obviously this might not be as clear on your video when you're watching this on YouTube because of YouTube compression. So it's totally up to you. You can adjust the grain size down, you can make it even more subtle. So let's make it even more subtle, click render again. So it's now going to update it with quite a subtle amount of grain. And that grain, when we do play it eventually, is going to be sort of animated. It won't be like a static overlay. So we'll say, okay, we're happy with that. Now, what happens if we go back to Proteus? Well, if we click on the Proteus tab, it's obviously going to take us back to how the Proteus looked, but without any of those extra noise things we've applied. So let's go grain. So let's say, okay, let's apply the same grain settings to Proteus or similar settings. And then we're more like for like comparing the two models again. Again, this is getting quite deep into it. There's no way I go through this whole extended process for everything I'm working on, but it's just a way to show you how you can A/B test all the different changes. So now you can go between the Thea model with a little bit of grain, and you can go to the Proteus model with a little bit of grain. Now, even though on the Thea model, for me, you've got a lot more separation of the actual elements of fur, I think it lacks a little bit of the wider tonal sort of range that you get off the original. So on this particular one, my gut feeling is I personally prefer the Proteus so far, just for a bit of an all-round look. So I'm going to take it off. So now all we're looking at is a before and after, and we're just concentrating on Proteus, right? So now we come down further and we say, what else could we do? Parameters. There's a button here that says enable parameters right at the bottom. So click on that, and it's opening up all these different extra parameters here. Now it's got dynamic and manual. And if we go over, if you hover over any of the titles of any of these parameters or controls in Video AI, by the way, it gives a little pop out that tells you what it is. So if we look at the difference between dynamic and manual here, it says dynamic enables controls for adjusting the automatically detected optimal settings, and then manual is full control over all settings. So when it's on dynamic, even though it says 0 here, if I adjusted improved detail up by 10, for example, it's going to adjust the detail by 10 points, whatever they relate to, on top of what it already perceives to be an ideal level of adjustment based on its own algorithms and detection. Whereas if you do it on manual, it's going to just add 10 from scratch. So it's really just a case of playing around. I like to start on dynamic because it's a little bit more subtle with the same controls, because it's already kind of giving you a little bit of what you want, so you can just be a little bit more subtle with it. So I feel like let's try and prove what we're doing here with this. Instead of just talking, let's try and prove the logic. So improved detail, let me drag it up to something quite high, a lot more than you probably do with anything. So let's do it on the dynamic mode. Right, and let's click to kind of update, and we'll watch this. We'll watch what happens. Now this probably won't look good because it'll be too crispy, and so that's what improved detail at 50 looks like on dynamic. But because we've got this great tab system, we don't have to just assume that we know what it's talking about. We can check what it's talking about. So I'm going to right click on the Proteus tab again up here, duplicate tab, and now I'm going to change this tab to manual 50. So now we're on manual mode 50, and I'm going to update that. So now we've got, again, another little subsplit of A/B testing where we've got dynamic on that tab of 50, so the value's the same, so improved detail 50, and then if we go over to the next one where it's manual 50, can you see how much more aggressive it is? So because it's not taking into account any automatic calculations based on these factors. So if you want absolute figures, stick with manual, but dynamic can give you more sort of results. That's just another little example of how we can use create a new duplicate of the tab along there to give an A/B testing again. So let's say we want to take that down. That's too much. So let's just put it about 15. Maybe a little bit of sharpening. Again, I'm kind of guessing at this point. I'm going to change a few things and then update the preview. Reduce noise, I don't think that's necessary. Going to click re-render. And by the way, if you've got a lot of different images, or should I say you've got a lot of different clips of footage of from the same shoot, the same video that you need to apply the same settings to, you don't have to do all this one by one on every single clip. And I'll show you shortly how to sort of save this as a preset, so you can just apply all these settings to another clip, so you can save tons of time. Okay, so I actually quite like that. Let's now zoom back out to fit, which is going to be looking at them in sort of fit to screen mode, or we can go for fit or 100. It's not. Can we type a value? I just want it to say 50%. No, it's not letting us do that. That's fine. Okay, let's stay zoomed in for a bit so we can see what we're doing. And always check the different areas, because it might look good where you're concentrating on, but now if we go around, we can see maybe the ears look a little bit crunchy. The fur on the ears look a little bit crunchy up there. But let's see what it looks like on the final output. So under all that section, we're now frame interpolation. So this is 30 frames per second, but I want to change this to, let's say, 60. I want this to be 60 frames per second, just my personal preference for a smoother output. So I'm not choosing slow motion, and underneath this, AI model, it's defaulted to Chronos Fast, which is a really good all-round model for changing the frame rate on something. You've got here other models that say next to them, like as a little tooltip, things like Apollo, up to 8 times slow motion. So for extreme slow motion, Apollo's a good one. Apollo Fast is just a lighter weight, quicker version of the original Apollo algorithm. Same with Chronos and Chronos Fast. And then this at the bottom, Aeon, again, I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce it, but it's like an extreme 16 times slow motion model. So if you go on here and hover your mouse over the words, it'll come with the tooltips. So for us, we've got it on Chronos Fast, which says specializes in fast motion with larger changes between frames. May not be faster processing than Chronos despite the name. So again, it depends what the input footage is, how it behaves. So Chronos, general frame interpolation model suitable for FPS conversion or slow-mo. Processing speed increases linearly with the number of generated frames. So in other words, if you go from 25 to 60 frames, it's going to have a linear increase in how much time it's going to take to render, versus if you took it from like 25 frames to 100 frames to do like a real slow motion or something like that, to be able to then do a slow motion. So let's just leave it on Chronos actually. So we'll go underneath here, duplicate frames, we're just going to click replace. Sensitivity, I always leave that at default personally. We've got to not convert it to HDR, not interested in stabilization, and I don't want any motion deblur on it because it's fine. So all we have to do now is we can either render out the complete clip, at which point we have to remember to make sure we've got no in point and out point set, otherwise it will render just that clip. So if you have got an in point and out point set, you can go and click on this icon in the bottom left and it will clear it. And if you don't want to set an in point and output, by the way, an out point, it's easy as pressing I on your keyboard, clicking somewhere else and clicking O, and then it will export just that amount. Or again, you can click that cross here to get rid of it. So we're not going to now render the clip in this view again, because we're happy with the overall visual. We now just to render out the clip or its movement. But if you wanted to just test and see what just a little snippet of the actual movement, you can do here. You can choose to render out a short amount. So let's just say 1 second. Let's render out 1 second. As you can see, 1 second is quite a big piece of this clip because the clip's so short. And you can see here it says processing 0 seconds. Now this is where it's going to take a minute to update on mine because it's not the most powerful machine. But this is where at this point you could check if you got a big clip, you could check just like a second to make sure that you're happy with the overall interpolation and how smooth it looks. And then when you're happy with that, you can just go export as, go make a cup of tea or something, and just export the whole clip. Now, so this is updated already with that, so I'm going to play that. And it looks like it hasn't, it still looks jerky movement on the right hand side. And that's just because my, it's rendered the clip, but it's not been able to play it back in real time because my computer's bogged down with stuff at the moment. Its RAM's probably bogged down in the GPU. So I am just going to click export as, and I will show the clip side by side on the screen in a moment.